Now, South African teachers will not be getting the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, at least not just yet. Not until the United States Food and Drug Administration approves the release of millions of doses of the coronavirus vaccine worldwide. Now, Johnson & Johnson's vaccines are central to the South African government's rollout plans, as they require only a single shot and are easier to store than the Pfizer-BioNTech double-shot vaccine that is now being provided to senior citizens above the age of 60. For more on this, I'm joined by Mia Malan, who's founding editor-in-chief at Bhekisisa Center for Health Journalism. Good to have you with us once again, Mia. Teachers were quite excited, looking forward to being the next in line to be receiving their Johnson & Johnson shots, but this is not to be. Now, the issue at hand here is the FDA having to clear the Johnson & Johnson vaccines, citing a potential case of contamination. Give us a little bit of background as to how we have found ourselves here. What happened?
Yes, Tommy. So the reason we find ourselves here is because there is a factory in Baltimore in the United States that manufactures ingredients for Johnson & Johnson's vaccine. And in March, the FDA went to inspect that factory and found one batch of ingredients to be contaminated with that of another vaccine that was produced in the same factory. They then threw out that batch and it wasn't allowed to be used, but then they stopped all production and they recommended that they investigate all the batches of ingredients that were manufactured during that time. And our vaccines in South Africa were manufactured with all of the batches, the 4 remaining batches that are currently being investigated for contamination. And even the additional vaccines that the health department announced, the 500,000 that we'll get for teachers and other school staff, that was also manufactured with one of the batches that could potentially be contaminated. So we're waiting for a decision of the FDA. We're expecting them to announce that today, but we're not guaranteed that it will happen today. And what can they announce? They can announce that all our vaccines are contaminated and can't be used, or they can announce that some of the batches are all right, some are not all right, or they can announce that all of them are fine, or a fourth option is that they could announce that it's not fit, that these vaccines, that ingredients are not fit to be used in the United States, but that our regulator, SAHPRA, can decide what to do.
Talk to us, Mia, about the reason for the contamination, as well as what the effects of contamination would be on the recipients of the vaccines.
So what happened in the factory was they produced the AstraZeneca vaccine and the Johnson vaccine in the same factory. And in easy terms, it would mean that the company was not careful enough to keep everything separate and to implement good pharmaceutical practices. And what happened was the batch in March that was thrown out was contaminated. The Johnson & Johnson batch was contaminated with parts of the AstraZeneca vaccine ingredients. So that is what the contamination means. What will happen if you take a contaminated vaccine? I have not read literature on that, but I would imagine that the 2 main issues would be, is it as effective and is it safe? Would you do something to you that is unsafe or unhealthy for you? And vaccines are sensitive products, and as you know, have to be kept at certain temperatures, and really is a difficult process of manufacturing them in sterile conditions in factories. So it's very important that they are manufactured exactly the way that they need to. And the reason we can't just decide that it's fine and we can use it is because this factory is based in the United States, and the FDA is the body that needs to make sure that products that are up to standard are manufactured in the United States, no matter who's going to end up using them. It would be the same process in South Africa. Our regulator, SAHPRA, would also make sure that pharmaceutical companies in South Africa prove that they are able to make pharmaceutical products that are of a good standard.
There are 2 scenarios, Mia, that we have here. One is that the FDA approves the Johnson & Johnson's vaccines. They're then released and they come into South Africa, or they're able now to be released and used widely for teachers. If that is the first eventuality, what are the challenges and what would have been the implications of the delay? And I'll get into the second scenario after you've answered that one.
So just to go a little bit back, we already have vaccines here that's waiting in Aspen in the Eastern Cape for us, about 2 million of them. And they were packaged here, but they were made with ingredients of the potentially contaminated batches. So that is what we have here. The batch that we're talking about for teachers is in the United States at the moment. And so that is not part of the batch that's waiting here in South Africa. What would happen is we will run behind on our targets because we don't have enough vaccines. So the health department set targets when we started with our rollout as to how many vaccinations they wanted to do per day. We haven't reached nearly that number of vaccinations. And the main reason really is because we don't have enough vaccines. According to the health department, we can do about double the number of vaccinations we currently do. At the moment, we do between 60 and 70,000 on Monday to Friday. And we simply can't scale that up if we don't have enough vaccines. So when you see in the timeline that people are 40 plus will get vaccinated from July onwards, that will probably not happen unless we get more vaccines.
You mentioned that we do have the 2 million in the plant in Gqeberha, but the 480,000, the ones that are designated for the teachers, are still in Baltimore. They're still overseas. By the time they arrive in the country, reports are that they'll only have 14 days in which to be used, because within that time period, or at least after that time period, these vaccines will in fact expire.
Yes, that's correct. That batch of vaccines, the 480,000, will arrive with an expiry date of June 28, and we would have to use them before that date because they've already been thawed, and then they last for a shorter period than if they were frozen. So my understanding from the health department is the reason why school staff and teachers were chosen as a group to get this batch of vaccines, which would be in addition to what we already have, is because it has to be used so fast, and the education department has most of the names of their staff already in a system, so block bookings on the EBDS would be relatively easy for them, and the education department has apparently also come up with a plan to drive staff to central points so that this can be distributed very quickly. And the other reason is that the health department feels that if we're going to use these vaccines, the J&J vaccines with a short expiry date at normal rollout clinics, we would have to open new sites because we can't do Pfizer and J&J at one site. It's too complex. And we would then potentially have to stop and start because we don't yet know whether we will have J&J vaccines and if we will have how many they will be, because we don't know which batches will be fine and which batches won't be fine. So they are concerned that if there's a stop and start approach in sites, normal rollout sites, that there might be a lack of trust in their ability to provide a continuous supply of vaccines, and that it might be better to target one group that could sort of go to vaccination sites where many people, that are temporary sites where many people can go at a time and get the vaccines consumed before they expire.
Time is clearly of the essence here. What are the type of deadlines that we're looking at? When does the FDA need to make the ruling? When do these vaccines need to be in South Africa? And how quickly, how many people need to be vaccinated per day in order for teachers to be vaccinated before the expiry date of the 28th of June?
So I'm not aware of a deadline for the FDA to make a decision. My understanding is they will announce a decision when they feel they have thoroughly investigated these batches, and they also had to complete an inspection of the factory that manufactured these batches of ingredients to make sure that they are now have improved their practices. And my understanding is that inspection happened on Friday, and that's why we didn't hear an announcement on Friday, but we only will hear it this week. Those vaccines will have to come to South Africa on a chartered flight, and we would still need to book a flight. Originally there was a flight booked for Sunday night, but then the announcement didn't happen on Friday night, so the flight had to be cancelled. So there isn't another flight that has yet been booked because we don't yet know what will happen to the vaccine. So we're not even sure if we will get the vaccines for teachers because we don't know if that batch will be contaminated or not. Once that batch gets flown here, and that will, if it's a uncontaminated batch, and if we hear in time of the FDA today or tomorrow, then it will be flown here later this week. When it arrives, it will still need to go to the Bloemfontein National Control Laboratory to get quality tested, and only then will it be able to be distributed to different provinces for teachers. So we're definitely only looking at the week of June 14th at the earliest for this batch of vaccines to be used for teachers. I don't know how many teachers would need to be vaccinated per day, but we have 480 jabs and we have a deadline of June 28th. So you could imagine how few days we have until that happens.
And so the other scenario, Mia, is that we get word from the FDA that indeed these dosages are contaminated and they cannot be used. What are the implications of that for South Africa's rollout program and for the vaccination of teachers as well specifically?
So if the batch, the 480,000, is contaminated for teachers, the teachers won't get vaccinated now because there will be no vaccines. In South Africa, for our wider rollout process, we would obviously have to look for more vaccines because it's the only thing that's going to save us. But we are constrained in South Africa with regards to which vaccines we can use, because we've got a variant here that is now known as the beta variant that has the ability to escape immunity. And we know that some vaccines, such as AstraZeneca and Novavax, is not good choices for us right now. So we would either need to try and procure more Pfizer and J&J, for which we have data on how effective they are against our variant. And we would need to look at other brands, Sinovac, Sinopharm, Sputnik, but we would first need data as to whether those vaccines will work against our variant. And of course, we would need these vaccines to first be registered by SAHPRA, our regulator, and that has not happened yet. Most of them have applied for registration, but it hasn't been completed. And the other only thing that we have to do is to use non-pharmaceutical measures, to wear masks, to social distance, wash hands, and perhaps look at even stricter measures than what we have at the moment for lockdown, smaller groups, not just 100 people inside, but even smaller than that, because other than that, we really have nothing to protect us before the third wave.
And before I let you go, if you could, Mia, just comment on this. There are reports that Russia had wanted to donate 15 million doses of Sputnik to South Africa in February. It was a goodwill gesture, allegedly, because we are part of BRICS. South Africa is alleged to have declined to take those vaccines. Give us the situation around that, and also the fact that now South Africa might have to pay over 600 million rand because the country now wants to actually procure the Sputnik vaccine.
Well, first of all, in February, Sputnik was not registered in South Africa. As you may recall, with Johnson & Johnson, we started with a Sisonke trial because Johnson & Johnson had not yet been registered for wider use in South Africa, and we had to wait until SAHPRA was satisfied with all the data. We're going to have to wait for all vaccines in a similar process. So if we were offered a donation in February, we would not have been able to use it because the registration would not have been through for Sputnik. The other issue is we need data that Sputnik works against our variant. Otherwise, it's a useless vaccine to us. So until we have clarity on those issues, that it's been registered and that it works against our variant, no vaccine, not just Sputnik, would be of use to us. So we would need to hear from SAHPRA, we would need data on the variant, and then we can make a decision as to whether it's a good vaccine for South Africa to use or not.
Mia Malan, always a pleasure talking to you. Thank you very much for your time and your insight. That's Mia Malan, the founding editor-in-chief of Bhekisisa Center for Health Journalism, certainly sinking her teeth into the vaccination issues in the country, as well as all the intricacies involved. It certainly is a time issue, a hurry up and wait issue, no matter how desperate the situation may seem at the time.